Good morning, my name is Sarah Mossad. I'll be doing an analytical presentation on Sojourner Truth's speech, Ain't I a Woman? The title of my presentation is Racial Slang is Not Truth. My thesis is that I'm going to be comparing Francis Gage's account of Sojourner Truth's speech with Marcus Robinson's account, and I'll be stating how Francis Gage used the different dialect to ultimately make Sojourner Truth's speech have racist slang into it. I'll be doing this by going over the two speeches, getting quotes from both, and I will be comparing them using the rhetorical triangle as well as literary terms. And I'll also be analyzing separate quotes in a side-by-side manner. Some background. Sojourner Truth's original name is Isabella Baumfree. She changed her name in 1797. Sojourner actually means traveler, so because of her Christian faith, she changed her name to the Traveling Truth. She was born into slavery in Swartzkill, New York. Her first language was Dutch, and this is something that I want to keep in mind, that her first language was Dutch, because as we can see when we go through it, that Francis Gage changed the speech to have a African-American slang to it, where words would change. Instead of where, it changed to war, and there was no way that she had an African accent. The speech, Ain't I a Woman, was given in 1851 at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio, and Francis Gage made her account 12 years later in 1863. Marcus Robinson wrote the earliest known account only 2 months after Sojourner Truth gave her speech, and it was published June 21st, 1851. Some mentality things to keep in mind. This is published by a university by Dr. Wilburn. During colonization, Europeans believed that Africans were biologically inferior and resembled wild, barbaric creatures. He also wrote, mentally oppressed under the assumption that they were non-human. And we will see this, how Francis actually implemented the speech to resemble these quotes. Going over some literary terms. The change in the dialect implemented by Gage changed the tone of Truth's speech. So we can see with Francis Gage's speech that if you actually reference onto your paper, the tone was changed to where instead of saying in the beginning, the first line of Francis Gage's speech, it says something along the lines of, "War dar children, something must be out of kilter." Whereas the first, how Truth actually asked her to speak, she said, "May I say a few words?" Gage also, she used slang terms where she says, "Twixt the N-word of the South and the women of the North, all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon." We can see that in Marcus Robinson's account, there was actually never these terms used. There was clear repetition in Gage's account where she says, "Ain't I a woman?" This was repeated 4 times throughout the speech, and it adds the effect of what Truth was trying to say, when she was asking if she was a woman. Going into some metaphors, there was a metaphor, ask for intellect. All I can say is if a woman have a pint and a man have a quart, why can't she have her little pint full? The pint was used to reference respect and rights that the woman desired in this time period, where the women did not want to overpower the men, and she stated this when she said, "You need not be afraid to give us our rights, for fear we will take too much." They did not want the men to not have rights. They did not want there to be more rights for women. They wanted the equality. Going into anaphora, this was clearly shown when Robinson and Gage used the terms "I am" and "I have." It was constantly repeated where Truth was saying, "I am this, I have done this, will you give me this?" And she was saying how she wanted the rights and the respect. Moving into rhetorical triangle. First with ethos, we will see that she says, "You need not be afraid to give us our rights, for fear we will take too much." And if you reference your handouts on the paper, you can follow along where it says ethos. And this is important because when she's saying ethos is ethical. It's the morality of what a person wants, and it's how it affects the speech. Talking about ethics, it makes a person think, she's right, like we should give them the same respect that they give us. And she says, "I've heard the Bible and have learned Eve caused man to sin." She's heard the Bible. She cannot read, but she can hear. And that is going into Logos, where she says, "I can read, but I can't read, but I can hear. So in ethics, she's saying that in a way where she's saying, I have read the Bible, I know that women cause man to sin. Will you let the women have the respect to earn that back? And with logos, she's just simply stating that she knows she can't read, but she knows that she can hear. She said, I have heard much about sex as being equal. So she knows that she has heard it, but she has not seen it yet, and she wants to see the sex as being equal. With pathos, I can carry as much as any man and can eat as much too if I can get it. So for women in this time period, it was hard for them, African American women especially, it was hard for them to get as much as men without the stability of a man by their side. And she's trying to reach out to the man. She's trying to, she was trying to make herself resemble the man, where she's saying, I can carry as much as anyone, I can do the same as you, will you let me have the same rights as you? And I would like to just say that the use of the rhetorical triangle in a speech is used to allow the speaker to connect with the audience. It's used to allow them to, she spoke to the man where she said, I can carry as much as you, I can eat as much of you, eat as much as you if you allow me. She used logos to state terms very bluntly, where she's saying, not bluntly per se, but just state the facts. And then she used ethos to try to connect with everyone else. Moving into the racial slang, the first one, and as I said, the first line of Francis Gage's account says, "Wild children, war dar, so much racket, something must be out o' kilter." Whereas Robinson's speech, if you can see, if there should be a little here or start next to where the speech actually begins, you'll see the first line does not say, "White children, if you have women's rights, give it to her and you feel better." That line is actually about halfway through the speech, and I matched them up because of the content that they have. Robinson's and Francis Gage's account were completely different in the way that they were structured. The only resemblance would be the Christ, which comes followed later. Also the way that it's presented. Gage presents it as a slang way where everything is misspelled, sounds like it has a harsh African accent, and keep in mind that Sojourner Truth did not have an African accent because she was born in the North, her first language was Dutch. There was no way that she had one. We have no way of knowing if she had a Dutch accent. And we can see that Robinson, she presents it very women-like, very calm, where it says, "White children, if you have women's rights, give it to her and you will feel better." This one, "Twixt the N-word of the South and the women of the North, all talking about rights, the white men." Now this, I couldn't even find content to match up with it because profanity was never used. She never referred to her people as the N-word. Racial references were never mentioned. She never had mentioned the white men because this speech was intended to be about women's rights. It was at the Women's Rights Convention. It was not meant to be a civil speech. Yes, she was a women's rights activist as well as a civil rights activist. However, this did not carry through, and this was not meant to be a civil rights speech. "I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me." You can see that plowed is misspelled. It has the commas, so it slows things down. It's slowed down. "I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me." Whereas in Robinson's, there's no comma, so it's "I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed, and can any man do more?" So do more than that. So you can see Robinson actually has that rhetorical question, and Robinson actually used the rhetorical question a lot more in his account, whereas Gage used the commas and slowed things down, trying to make herself seem as though she was speaking slower, the less educated account. This words misspelled again were meant to account for the dialect that she was said to have had according to Gage, and the way that she had spoken. "Christ wasn't a woman, where did your Christ come from?" So you can see it was meant to have that accent. Instead of saying a simple word "where," it was "war." Again, it was implemented to make her sound like she was less educated. Robinson says, and how did your Christ come into the world? And how came Christ into the world? This again, it's simple. It has that rhetorical question that Robinson used a lot more. From God and a woman, Gage states it. She doesn't use a rhetorical question. She states what had happened, and both of them have the same effect where Robinson says, through God who created him and women who bore him. Now, you can see that Robinson explains the thought more. He allows truth to sound as though she had her thoughts put together, whereas Gage, it was simple, from God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. Again, we see the slang, the racial slang, where it's with instead of with, as well as it's a shorter thought, where Robinson says, man, where was your part? It's again the rhetorical question. Robinson seems to do this a lot throughout it, and honestly, it seems like a way that truth may have spoken more. As a thought, Robinson was known to have known Sojourner Truth. It was one of the most accurate accounts, and Gage wrote her version, her account, 12 years later. So we can see that throughout all of this, the ethos, the logos, the pathos, they were all meant to implement the speech. And if we pull back the term an anti-woman, that term was not used whatsoever throughout Marcus Robinson's account. It was never seen. The terms, of course, they were similar. There was different versions of saying an anti-woman where there was the rhetorical question involved instead. Thank you. Any questions?
I had a question. What was the impact of Harriet Beecher Stowe on Francis Gage?
Beecher Stowe. I'm not sure.
Thank you.